Hello, everyone, and welcome to Yes 30 Abundance and Wealth with Brandy Vale. I'm your show host, and every week we are taking the pulse of the new world, the new economy, and what is going on in our world. So, with that being said, I wanted to just share a little bit about the news. We all hear that the news can be somewhat programming. It could be insightful. It can be dark. It can be a, awakening for some of us of what's going on in our world. And every week we are doing a short 30-minute set with the news on the Coin Republic, brought to you from the deep insights of decentralization and DeFi, altcoins, crypto, Web3, and your modern world. My name again is Brandy Vale, and we'll begin with a deep insight into Bitcoin, or rather Bitcoiners. How many of you heard the word Bitcoiners from Donald Trump? Yes, we are now, I won't say plagued, but we are now the Bitcoiners officially. And I think it's quite interesting. So we'll talk a little bit about how the emerging market for Web3 cryptocurrency was actually fully supported by President-elect and former President Donald Trump. We're also going to deep dive into some of the aspects of sovereignty and currencies around the world, global economy, and we'll get to have a little more fun by the conversation and opening it up for real talk. With that being said, I'd like to welcome Varuni, our editor-in-chief over at the Coin Republic.
Hi, Brandy. Thank you so much for having me on your show every week. It is my pleasure to join Yes 3.0 Network's podcast where we talk about all things crypto, blockchain, and Web3. And it won't be wrong to say that the last entire week, the star of the show was Bitcoin. You definitely attended the conference in Nashville, the Bitcoin 2024 conference, which we will talk about in detail. But as I kick off the news section today, one of the biggest sections in our news section today will be around the Bitcoin 2024 conference, which was all over the news last week. And we, of course, have more details from what was actually happening on ground from Brandy later on. But before that, I will start off with the most interesting pieces of news that happened at the conference as well as across the globe. But I shall begin with what seemed to be like the showstopper situation for the conference, which was Mr. Donald Trump's arrival. Now, Donald Trump spoke at the Bitcoin 2024 conference in Nashville, and he pledged to remove the SEC chair, Gary Gensler, if elected in November. Now, there's a love hate relationship that the crypto insiders have with Gary Gensler. More hate, less love, I'd say. But this was quite a bold statement that Trump made at the event. And of course, this was applauded and cheered around. But other than this, Trump also promised to prevent US from selling its Bitcoin and create a strategic BTC reserve. Trump detailed his plans for the cryptocurrency industry. Now, another interesting thing was that he arrived an hour late to the stage but delivered a speech that covered a wide range of campaign topics, which included specific promises related to Bitcoin as well as the broader crypto sector. During his speech, Trump, of course, surprised the audience with the promise to replace SEC Chair Gary Gensler. The crowd responded with cheer and applaud, as a lot of people in the industry see Gary Gensler um, as an enemy to the larger crypto narrative. Whether it is true or not, of course, remains to be seen. However, a lot of people believe that Gary Gensler's policies are unfairly targeted towards crypto companies or enterprises, and they try to classify more digital assets as unregistered securities. The narrative, of course, has improved a lot more now than it was from a year ago from now. Trump also stated his intentions to prevent the US government from selling Bitcoin holdings, which include approximately 213,000 Bitcoin, worth nearly around 14.5 billion US dollar, based on recent data from Arkham. And we see that the US government every now and then sells a chunk of those Bitcoin, and Trump is at the moment promising a bigger Bitcoin reserve. So it'll be interesting to see whether Trump would be following something that El Salvador already is, where they're creating their own reserve and they're trying to accumulate as much Bitcoin as they can, and whether it will be a strategic decision that Trump actually goes ahead and takes is something that remains to be seen. After all, said promises are said promises until they receive the light of the day. In another news, of course, we're seeing a lot of campaigning in the US around the elections happening with the agenda of cryptocurrencies in the back end. Another news that was around a similar topic was coming in from RF Kennedy Jr., who says that Bitcoin is vital to dollar stability, and he calls for a 4 million BTC reserve. He is, of course, an independent presidential candidate and announced that his administration would use Bitcoin to stabilize the US dollar. RF Kennedy Jr. intends to achieve this objective by establishing a strategic reserve backed by Bitcoin, pretty similar to what Trump is also aiming to do. Now, this goes on to show that cryptocurrencies and the Web3 space have become a focal point for the ongoing US presidential campaigns ahead of the November's scheduled ballot. Presidential aspirants RF Kennedy Jr. and, of course, Donald Trump have publicly endorsed Bitcoin and have continuously used the digital asset as a central campaign element. Another interesting news that I came across was that Coinbase and Google veterans have raised 5 million US dollar for a blockchain alternative to LinkedIn. Now we know how important LinkedIn is, especially to so many people who are working, to so many enterprises. It's more of a platform that we call corporate or formal, and now people are going after a blockchain alternative to LinkedIn. Icebreaker, co-founded by Coinbase and Google veterans Dan Stone and Jack Delay, has secured a 5 million in seed funding at a 21 million valuation to scale its team and build blockchain's answers to LinkedIn. So seems like we'll be having another alternative to LinkedIn. Whether it'll of course be successful, how it'll perform in the market is something that remains to be seen. But at the moment, it's interesting to see a pivot towards blockchain based technologies. And this would also, I feel, be like a moving light in terms of social fire platforms or growth for social fire platforms. We're already seeing a lot happening in terms of social fire, but this, of course, is a massive step, and an alternative to LinkedIn being backed by Coinbase and Google veterans is something that can truly be a game changer for the social fire sector at large. And these were, I feel, some of the news pieces that caught my attention, but I'd love to know more about what really happened at the Bitcoin 2024 conference from you, Brandy.
Mm, thank you so much. Okay, first on a scale to 1 to 10, because I love to know, how everyone was feeling. I had an amazing time. This was one of the biggest and best events for our industry, known from the very beginning of its embryonic stages. As you could hear in my tone, I'm very excited because so much happened. You never
Mm,
know what politicians are going to say, do you?
right.
Yeah. And so day one was industry day, and that was on Thursday. It was very light. Everybody was very, sovereign and talking about banking and talking about freedom and talking about justice. Wonderful educators on the stage where they were talking about the history of their work in DeFi, the history in the work of policy. And a lot, I say, was against politics, was against in the beginning of the conversation. And then day two happened on Friday. And Friday, you could start to feel the energy of RFK, having Bobby in the house, and having some of Jack Dorsey in the house. And oh my goodness, you must watch Jack's presentation on YouTube. If you haven't looked at the recordings on YouTube, look at Bitcoin 2024. We were the official media supporters of Bitcoin 2024, along with hundreds, maybe even thousands of other networks promoting, supporting, sharing. I was on the ground with 15 different interviews of course, positive, impactful companies that are making change in the world. And that's what I'm here to do. Let's talk about day 3, shall we, Varuni?
Absolutely.
Okay, so day 3, from a media standpoint, we would have had to get there at 6:30 a.m. to do the security check-in.
Hmm.
And between myself and a few other Fox reporters, we were discussing, well, is it worth it, right? Is it going to be worth it to be with thousands of people in the audience looking and watching and listening? And we decided, or at least I did, the Fox girls probably stayed, but we decided to go to DNA and do the live broadcast there. And they probably had about 300 people in their group. And DNA Fund is also, if you know who he is, Brock Pierce, chairman of blockchain, um, we'll call it nonprofit.
Right.
They held their own group and exercised what I would call the freedoms of speech and support a liberal, yet I would say it's not very much on the Democratic side. Excuse me. So, where are we headed? What I experienced with Donald Trump was somewhat awakening moment, because I can't say I was a full supporter, neither here nor there. It doesn't really matter. It's what I sensed, his shift in consciousness since he had the assassination attempt.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I'm sure we can talk deeper on what that means in a psyche and a conversation of consciousness once your life is at risk. You know, what happens to you as a human and what happens energetically and what you say to the audience about the next step. And I know it's not a very tactical conversation to have, but it is humanizing technology and it is humanizing the politics around it. And so, with that being said, I would love to have Brian come to the stage and participate in this conversation about the news and what he experienced when it came to Donald Trump's announcement and Gary Gensler's promises and so much more. Thank you for being here, Brian, of Expert Dojo, founder, changing the lives of many startups. Thank you for showing up today.
Yo, Brandy, I've got my favorite avatar up on the screen, so I'm looking forward to it.
Super
Yes.
cool.
So tell us a little bit of what your experience was at Bitcoin, being a Bitcoiner now. Yeah.
It's great. It was great. It was great, 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 great. It was really funny. While you were just talking there, I was setting up a meeting with DNA with one of their folks to meet with one of our companies. They're a great fund. They're so aggressive in the crypto space and they're really creating the community. And if crypto and blockchain and Web3 is all about community, those guys have really, nailed it down on being able to have that epicenter of community all the time. So to your question, I love what's happening I love what's happening in the Bitcoin conference. Traditionally, I wouldn't have gone to the Bitcoin conference. I would have gone to Consensus, or I would have gone to one of the other Web3, or I would have gone to ETH Denver. I would have gone to one of the other Web3 conferences, which would have been totally focused on the development of blockchain, the development of decentralization, tokenization. What does that mean? How is the world going to change? But what I've kind of realized, I suppose, over the last while is the foundation of everything that's happening in Web3 really is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is our great, savior, waving the flag coming across the oceans into foreign lands and making people trust everything that sits behind it. So it was most definitely a frenzy, if not even more than that, over the last 3 days for everything that's happening there.
I love that. Yes, the image of waving a flag and making this feeling of an emotion around freedom is much needed. Would you agree?
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's huge. And look, it was impossible. If we think of this as a perfect revolution of something that's very beautiful and wonderful against something that can be very repressive. And centralization is not only repressive, but it's also massively inefficient. If you think about like every single time that you needed to go and buy something in the store, you had to go to a person to ask them if it was okay or if they had that particular thing in the store. That's really what centralization is. And when you take it to finance, when you take it to schooling, when you take it to governments, when you take it to everything, it leaves us open to a world where we can really be held in bondage for an awfully long time. And so the beautiful thing about decentralization is it allows us to start this wonderful revolution and give people the opportunity of having phenomenal efficiencies in their life, which really give them freedom. That's really when we talk about digital currency, it allows them to get to that place. And so the Bitcoin conference was incredible. By the way, the other talk that I loved there, Michael Saylor did an incredible speech. Oh my gosh.
Yes, that threw me into an open space of what's to come next, because the residual, or the ripple effect rather, is that now we know, and there's no reason that we get to go back to the old rule. So what he brought to the table was, one of the key points he made was in philanthropy and humanitarian services. Obviously I focus on impact. The there's no need to do things in the old world the way you can do it now. Now you can actually stake, you can actually share, you can actually have transparency. There's no reason the number should be hidden. There was a lot of clarity that I think came from his talk. What were your
Yeah.
takeaways with Michael Saylor?
So first of all, he began the talk by speaking about the lie that is finance, right? Everybody is told when they're born that we have the dream. For us, it's the American dream. For other people, it's whatever dream is in their country. And that dream is the dream of financial freedom. But unfortunately, hidden within the true reality of finances, and I use the word hidden very, very deliberately, there are so many taxes, there are so many areas that actually pull away from you being able to break through and have the life that you always wanted without having to worry about if you could afford it tomorrow, that it was an impossible dream. And so he compared all of the different methodologies, the different systems of being able to build wealth. And then he compared those to Bitcoin, and he compared it to the greater decentralized world in general. And it was just stark in contrast, and not just going forwards, but also looking back. I'll also add another point. Like people like Michael Saylor, they've been speaking about this for a long time. And what's very unique about this particular revolution is that we've had this for years. Like we had the cyberpunks, back in the day, and then we had Occupy Wall Street, and all these movements were about inherent unfair systems that people wanted to speak out against, and they wanted to be able to change the world. What happened? They failed. Some took a little bit longer to fail than others, but they had horrible failures. But in this particular case, digital currency, which is decentralized, is singularly the scariest possible thing that a government can ever encounter. If a government loses control of its currency, it loses control of everything. So the actual fact that we're still having a discussion about this, the fact that there is an ETF for Bitcoin and now one for Ethereum, the fact that actually governments are speaking openly on stage about digital decentralized currency that is not owned by themselves is an unbelievable victory for the people, not for Bitcoiners, not for crypto, not for Web3, but for the whole 8 billion people on the planet who want to be able to take control of their lives. So I think this is truly a historic time in history, and one that we should just be reveling in. And those people who don't understand what I'm talking about, you need to read up real fast.
100%. Some of the speakers that were there, aside from Donald Trump, which is the 45th president of the United States, in case you were wondering,
Mm-hmm.
Robert F. Kennedy, which is running a campaign of the independent presidential candidacy right now. He is going all in. I don't know if you watched the unelection. Did you watch the other election that he had presented during? their debate, the other debate?
Yeah, I've seen him for a long time. I really like him. I think he speaks very eloquently. He's got an uphill battle. America's not exactly made for a three-horse race. But I think it's a wonderful thing, and I don't want to overshadow him because he has been speaking about the power of building digital currency and building wealth for people for years and years and years. But it is kind of significant he spoke. It is unbelievably significant that ex-president Trump said the things that he said on stage, like unbelievably. Like, and I don't want to overshadow people because there were so many great talks there. We had. I mean, Russell Brand, who I love as a speaker, was speaking there as well. But just nothing compares to that speech that we had at 3 o'clock on the Saturday. It was incredible.
Yes, and a few great words from Kathy Wood, Edward Snowden, Vivica Ramsamy. And
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think there were over 300 speakers. Don't quote me on that, but here we are with a financial system, a global financial system, emerging marketplace, and USA, which is a powerhouse and is not going to quit. They are going to find a way. So I'm curious in future conversations as we start to wrap up, where do you think this is headed between India, China, United
Ooh.
States, UAE? I know it's a big question, and it's not, look, we're not attached to the idea of politics. It's just a concept. Can we actually have one world?
Okay, so something really interesting that's happening in the world right now that again everybody needs to be aware of is BRICS. And BRICS is quietly being building, which is Brazil, it's India, it's China, it's Russia, and I believe South Africa. And now they've added lots more countries onto it as well. And they created a single currency. And that single currency is backed by actual precious metals, which is a huge problem for us because our currency is not backed by precious metals, our gold, or anything like that. It used to be. They have specifically come together to build a currency which can be more powerful than the US dollar. So I'm going to say something to you, which I think is not terribly unlike what ex-President Trump said up on stage. I don't know if anybody ever saw that wonderful episode in Newsroom, the TV series that was on years ago. And there's a moment in there where the main protagonist is on stage and he's on a panel and there's a few people on the panel. And then a young lady stands up and she says, "Tell me why America is the greatest country in the world." And you go through it, and anybody who hasn't seen it, you should just watch the entire piece. But the genesis, the end result really is where he says, America is not the greatest country in the world. And he lists a bunch of statistics saying where America have fallen down. But then he says, but we sure used to be.
Hmm.
And we can be again. And if we look at the reserves around the world, there was 98% of all reserves were in US dollars before. That's down to about 40-50% right now. If we look at the debt that we're facing in the United States, it's at levels that has never been looked at before. If we look at our streets and what's happening with people sleeping in the streets, homeless, mental health issues that we have, this is a pale shadow of what this wonderful country used to have previously, but it sure can be again. And I really believe that the energy that's in here behind Bitcoin, that's behind digital currencies and behind these incredible innovations, by harnessing them, by creating regulation around them inside the United States, then what will happen is the country can become so strong again based on this new wave of innovation, which we are embracing and not pushing away. So I think we're in a very, very dangerous time right now, and we will get through it because our politicians will go on the right path and do this thing properly.
I have Nothing to say. That was a beautiful way of reframing it and giving back authority. There's the question that says gold was brought up in the conversation with Donald Trump, and he says, and gold may not be the winner in the future. And you bringing up these precious metals, it's very important to know that we are creating a currency, and that currency without void is currency. It is a flow of wealth. It is the flow of knowledge. It is a flow of information. And if we are able to create structures that allow us to use that flow of information, like our personal ID, our personal consumption, our consumption rate of energy, our consumption rate of knowledge, then this becomes valuable in a marketplace. And with that being said, maybe we get to move and pay attention to politics. And it's not just about politics as a way to have one side or the other, but to really vote. And if we aren't voting, then we got to stand in. And so that's my final words. I'm going to give it over to you, Brian, for your final words as we start to recap and get ready for our actual live stream where everybody can join us talking about startup and expert dojo and all the capital that you have brought to the table for our industry. What are your final words when it comes to the Bitcoin 2024, where we're headed with the Bitcoin?
Ooh, well, I think that blockchain, Web3, cryptocurrency, digital currencies are the greatest innovation and paradigm shift of my time. There will never be anything more significant than what is happening right now. I believe in politics, what you said is true. If you'd have asked me 4 years ago, maybe even 8 years ago, did I care about who won or who lost? I would say no. Go back 4 years, no. Go back 4 years, no. Go back 4 years, no, because the country would take care of itself and politicians would do what politicians would do and we would come out the other side. But I believe right now in this moment, the United States needs saving. And I believe that there are many other countries in the world that need saving. And the way to do that is to bring transparency, to bring honesty, and to bring a direction that is truly out there to help people rather than the small few groups of people who take everything for themselves. And we have that opportunity to be able to do it. And all of us need to lean in if we want to make it through this period.
Thank you so much for being our guest today, and I look forward to seeing you on the spotlight. Go ahead and pop off and prepare for our next adventure together. Thank you again, Brian of Expert Dojo. We'll see you soon. Varuni, how about your final words as we start to come to close here from the Coin Republic?
Wow, that was a lot to take in, coming in from Brian and you, of course, the political narrative, how it's tied in with the idea of decentralization. And to add on to that, what I feel is going forward, the nations that would be the leaders in terms of technology, in terms of finance, would be the ones who are able to hop on the technology train the quickest. And I feel that educating their people about the right kind of technologies and educating their people about the facade that financial freedom is, like Brian rightly mentioned, now that so many people are already educated and want to educate themselves more about how to be truly free or financially free, I feel governments will play a huge role in educating their citizens about the financial freedom that we talk about. And now that people are aware about it, it would obviously play a key role in choosing the right kind of governments going forward or moving ahead. The world that we want to live in, I feel the idea of true decentralization coupled with the revolutionary technologies that we're seeing in the various sectors, and of course coupled in with the sustainable development goals that we have, I feel these things will be what will lead any nation to be the powerhouse in the world that we want to live in. That would be my 2 cents on this, Brandy. Thank you so much for having me represent the Coin Republic on your show every week. Looking forward to the spotlight and looking forward to our show next week.
Thank you so much for being here, Varuni. Appreciate you being a conduit for India and Dubai and all of our events that we have planned. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you so much, Brandy. Have a great day.
And in close to our weekly recap, this is Real Talk. This is Abundance and Wealth. Yes, 3O stands for not your home, not your workplace. It's your third place, your community. And this requires all of us to come together and have an opinion, a positive opinion. And of course, there could be some negative opinions. That's what America is all about, free speech. I believe that, you might want to push back about it, but I believe that if we show up in a positive way, then we can have positive impact. So join us weekly with your questions and comments. And if you too would like to be on our spotlight and enjoy the conversation, feel free to leave a comment in the post. We are looking at your questions and your comments weekly in order to give you an NFT full access to some of our events coming up in the near future, including Fashion Week, Art Basel Art Week, and even going to the moon on SpaceX with Space Blue next payload. Learn more about that and more by following me, Brandy Vale, on LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for chiming in.